Okay. 12:03. I always like to wait because I have such a hard time finding links. But it's our official starting time. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Reclaiming Wellness Outdoors. I'm very excited for this conversation. Reclaiming Wellness, if you haven't been with us before, is a series of webinars that unpack and break down the complexities and assumptions surrounding diverse methods of expression, engagement, and wellness, and their personal relationship and communal impacts on our health. Together, we move beyond the dominant narrative to explore our connection to land, tradition, and art. We have 3 panels already recorded and on our websites, 2 on art, street arts, and 1 on birthwork if you want to watch later. My name is Luisa Martínez. I am the California Arts Council Fellow for the Museum of Us. I work within the Decolonizing Initiatives Department, and I'm beyond excited to do so. I would like to thank the Director of Decolonizing Initiatives, Brandy McDonald, and Kelsey Pickard, Community Affairs Coordinator, for helping this panel come together. They're both here, but their cameras are off. And thank you to our funder, the California Endowment for Arts and Culture from the City of San Diego. A little bit of Zoom logistics, although I know we all have about a year or more of experience. There's a chat function and there's a Q&A space. We ask that you use the Q&A space to send questions to our panelists. You can also use the chat function to send links or anything you want to share that's related. If you mix up one with the other, that's fine, but putting questions in the Q&A space helps us stay organized. You may send questions at any time, and we will start weaving them into the conversation during the second half at about 45 minutes. You can also see a couple of squares, one with the Museum of Us logo and maybe like a black square. So if you hover over the 3 dots in their square, you can click Hide Non-Video Participants if you just want to see our panelists. And also in the view, so top corner, you can click View, and I recommend Gallery View so you can see everybody at the same time. If you need any assistance with any of this, you can send a message in the chat and Kelsey will help out. And this conversation will later be uploaded to YouTube with a transcription. So before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to make a land acknowledgement. The Museum of Us recognizes that it sits on the ancestral homeland of the Kumeyaay Nation. Kumeyaay peoples are the original stewards of the area and continue to maintain their ancestral connection to the land. The Kumeyaay Nation are a vibrant indigenous community that maintains their political sovereignty and cultural traditions. The museum extends its respect and gratitude to the Kumeyaay people who have lived here since time immemorial. We all live on indigenous land, that is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary homeland of indigenous peoples. Our panelists and myself join you from the homelands of the Kumeyaay, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, Machimudas, and Kalapuya. I invite us all to recognize the lands we occupy. I want to acknowledge that the futures we work towards, the practices we hold in these conversations, are only true if they are inextricably linked to the self-determination and sovereignty of all indigenous people, from California to Palestine. With that, I would like to introduce our amazing panelist. Dr. Mellissa Linton-Villafranco, pronouns she, her, is an assistant professor of the School of Social Transformation at Arizona State University. She earned her PhD in ethnic studies from UC San Diego and has been the Latino Outdoors San Diego ambassador since 2019. She created the Latino Outdoors San Diego Instagram, which is @Los San Diego, and worked to bring the unique social, racial, environmental justice community in the San Diego borderlands together. She's also a queer community organizer and first-generation Salvadoran from Long Beach, California. Thank you for joining us, Melissa. Amath Diouf, pronouns he, his, is a Black Muslim outdoor writer who encourages outdoor explorations and self-exploration. He is currently based in Asheville, North Carolina, and is inspired by stories that delve into introspection and community development. After embracing Islam in college, Amath was inspired to be a Khalifa, or steward, on Earth and cultivate a global perspective that protects humans, plants, and animals. By learning from one another, Amath hopes to better understand what it means to be a supporting member of our global community. He believes that the outdoors is a place of opportunity to be best caretakers we can be. With nature's therapeutic properties, spending time out in nature strengthens our pursuits to step inside ourselves and practice self-care. Amath has published work featured on several major platforms like Melanin Basecamp and Gear Junkie. As he continues his journey into the outdoor industry, he is excited to combine efforts to bridge the gap between the outdoors and wellness. Welcome, Amath. Marc Chavez, pronouns I, was born and raised in Los Angeles County, California, and is of Mexican-American, Indian, Nahua, Michoacan, and New Mexican Spaniard descent. Chavez graduated from the University of California, San Diego in communication, third world studies, and postgraduate research in community educational linkages. Chavez has over 25 years of experience in higher education and community linkages. In 2000, out of San Diego, California, Chavez founded intertribalyouth.org, based on developing a working model for community and institutional education. The program's aims is to indigenize education and has been nationally and internationally recognized as a holistic approach to education. Youth and mentors from across North America, Hawaii, Panama, Jamaica, Mexico attend various national and international summer and spring programs. In 2014, Chavez initiated Native Like Water to focus on intergenerational cultural exchange between the ocean and freshwater land environments. In 2019, Chavez was chosen as a Forward Promise National Fellow with the responsibility of disrupting the narrative and building a culture of health and model for boys and young men of color. Chavez continues to study traditional medicine, indigenous coastal culture, and ancestral native foods, and enjoys surfing and sharing the stoke of the ocean and jungles, and donates over 70% of his time, his professional time as director of Native Like Water. Thank you, Marc. We all love your setting. And Arya, Tenzin, Namdol, pronouns she, they, is a first-generation Tibetan settler on Turtle Island, currently tending space in Machimudas. The colonizers call this land East Haddam, Connecticut. She is a proprietor of ronsbikes.com and is a founder of WTF Bikes, now called Radical Adventure Riders. Arya comes to adventure bicycle travel through environmental activism and recognizes the bicycle as a vehicle for inner and outer peace. They work towards expanding what it means to be a cyclist in today's world. They love decolonial frameworks, Buddhism with a lowercase b, and wants to give deep thanks to the friends, family, and peers who give them the courage to be courageous. Hi, Arya. Welcome, everyone. There's such an amazing intersection of passions and experiences. Just reading your bios is like squad goals. So I'd like to begin by talking about your joys and your connections to the outdoors. I read your bio, but I want to expand a bit on what connects you to your practices. When we were chatting before this, Amath mentioned psychological, spiritual connections. And yeah, if you could each talk about the specific connection you have to the outdoors. I see Marc has a connection to water, Arya has a dedication to cycling. Let's talk more about these specificities. Whoever wants to jump in. Y'all so nice, I can choose to.
I'm so eager.
Melissa, yeah.
So hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here and share with everyone. And I think what has motivated me always in recreating outdoors and what continually draws me back is an understanding of place-based knowledge. And I am really inspired by Glenn Coulthard, who's Dene, and it's place-based knowledge is a reciprocal understanding of land and of ourselves, the animal kingdom, the elements, and I've really enjoyed hearing Amath speak about this. I'm excited to hear more about what he has to say, because there is a sense of serenity and spirituality that comes with connecting. I've described before, like your circadian rhythm, you wake up with the sun, you go to bed at like 8:30, or if you want to stay by the fire, you can stay up later, but there's a sense of resetting when I go outdoors. I love to rock climb. I love understanding how rock got there. Like Joshua Tree is like you're in Mars, like understanding volcanic eruptions, and there's so much knowledge, physics, science, beauty, mystery, and those are just some passions that keep me coming back always and wanting to be intentional, conscious, and aware when I'm recreating. So I can open up the floor with that. It's a great question.
That was amazing. I wrote that down, place-based knowledge.
Yeah.
I think that's also one of the things that gravitates me towards the environment or the outdoors. Um, you mentioned so many things about learning about how things got there, Melissa, and that really sparked a lot of many ideas in my head, because I think it's, we live in such a world of like instant gratification that taking time to step back and realizing that all of this took a process, I think would help us even be better at cultivating the change we want to see, and maybe even be better at like coping with things that are hard in life. And I think it'll just make us hopefully more resilient. So I like how you brought that up. To me, also, yeah, I think my relationship to the environment, I think it's more so spiritual than anything. I would really like to delve into like the history, like you said, of just the resources, or it's the science of the different disciplines, and things of that nature. But to me, it's almost like understanding that we as humans have such a capacity to do things that other species can't. So it's like this sense of like social responsibility. And I feel like that responsibility is there just because it's coupled with beauty. And I say that because when we see someone or we see something beautiful, we immediately want to preserve it and protect it. So now we're taking it upon ourselves to be responsible for the well-being of that person or place. And so I think the more we step outside, the more we curate this sense of love and care for ourselves and the environment.
Okay, well, I'll go next. Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. Just like Luisa said, it's kind of like squad goals. I wish you all were here with me. You'll all definitely be invited to come learn how to surf if you don't already this summer. So for sure on that one. Water. I grew up in Los Angeles in an area called La Puente, which is kind of be considered kind of landlocked. So it took like an hour to get to the beach. I would go with my family probably once every year during the summer, and I didn't know too much where I was from, in a sense, even though my parents from Mexico or New Mexico. But when I went to the ocean, it was obvious right away that it was kind of a wealthy access spot. But something inside of me said, there's a connection there, and I didn't know until relatively recently. And where I'm actually at right now in Mexico is what would be considered my matriarchal homeland, my grandmother's area. It's a reservation on an area that looks, if you're from San Diego, looks a lot like La Jolla, but without houses. And indigenous people kind of run their territory here, so you don't see that neo-colonial invasion that you would see at normal beach or coastal areas around the world. So, and it just happened recently from following spirit. And so I've been doing this work for 25 years, teaching indigenous people how to surf, or particularly in San Diego, on how to come back to the coast. And this whole time I've been doing this, I had no idea this is where my grandmother is from, on the sea. So it kind of was a long process of me actually finding my identity. And Native Like Water was something that I really wanted us to see our reflection in the water, to see our reflection in nature, and to think about, regardless of where we are enjoying nature or recreating, is that what is that we're looking at is actually us. Water has a reflection, it has a memory. And if anything, we're mostly water, more than we are skin or bones. We're water. And that I felt took us to the right place. I'm going just to start with a quote, and I'll let the next panelists go on, but this is from Dr. Emoto, which wrote The Secrets of Water. And he says, to consider that before we became human beings, we existed as water. We get closer to finding the answer to the basic question of what a human being is. And so that's, I think, the start of our relationship, not just with water, but with nature or the outdoors. And I really like where this panel is going with this vibe. Thank you.
I had to get myself on unmute here. I was like, everything you were saying, Marc. I really resonate with the coming from water. I think about the womb, you know, us kind of the origins floating in what was like a water-like state. And also resonated so much with how that brought you to yourself, brought you home to yourself, because I could say the same about bicycles. At least the way I ride bicycles now, because everyone I know rides a bicycle and learned how to ride a bike when they were a kid. And immediately when asked, how did you get into bicycles? People would say, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I would ride my bike. And that's when I felt a sense of freedom, like agency of movement. And I could say the same. I got into adventure bicycle riding when I turned 30. Because I was gifted an adventure cycling bike. You know, this opportunity was given to me as a gift. And I think that's a beautiful origin. And I've only been doing this kind of riding for 5 years, but I've been really at it for 5 years. And I found my space in the bike community through advocacy work. And at this point, I have such incredible friends that I've met through that work. And through just riding bikes. And for me, again, I resonate with you too, Amath, is a lot about spirit and about those connections that you make. And again, I could say the same thing about Dr. Mellissa too, because it's about that land connection and its ability to heal us. So yeah, I would say sparkles to all of that. I totally feel what y'all are saying, because that's been my experience in adventure cycling.
Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, I feel such a sense of like love and respect and like awe for the environment in this space. And my next question is like, you know, imagining all of your relationships to the land and to different scenarios, and like feeling even through your, you know, your few sentences, like feeling the bounty of that connection. There are still a lot of our communities like don't have that, right? Or like can't find that. Why do you imagine that is? What do you imagine are the biggest barriers to accessing the outdoors for Black, Indigenous, or people of color?
Well, I'll just start. I think there has been a disconnection from mother. You know, if you look at the history of the United States, what they did to indigenous people, in addition to indigenous species, was remove them from their families and remove them from their mothers. And in a way, I think that still happens today, where we have been removed from our natural setting or our natural way of being. And so I think some of us are longing for that, like I was, and I didn't know exactly what until, you know, later in adult life, but I can kind of afford to point in my own direction. But that barrier, I think, starts with being disconnected. I work with urban folks, and I also work with rural folks. Of course, there's two different sides there. The reservation rural indigenous folks that I work with have been disconnected from the ocean. So their natural spaces and land was La Jolla or the beaches throughout California, and then they were pushed back into the mountainous areas. So there was a physical disconnection there, of course, through colonization and removal. But for me, I work with folks from all walks of life and cultural backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds, and I see that as well. And in my fellowship that I'm part of, which has a large colleague base of African Americans, to bring African American folks into the sweat lodge or into what we call earth-based practice, or I guess you can call it ritual, but I like to call it practice, earth-based practices, and to see the transformation that takes place by coming back to just, you know, having bare feet on the earth, or just these earth-based practices is amazing. And, you know, in the sweat lodge, or even in this panelist thing, I see you as sisters and brothers. But what that means once we go through this ritual, it's almost like as if you could take me on your bicycle with you, or take me on whatever that you do, but actually taking it one step further when we're just focused on that relationship, just focus on that reconnection with mother. Really, that's what it is. We're putting our head on the breast, on the bosom of our mother again. And that connection, again, spirituality was mentioned. Of course, that's what that is. It's a physical thing, because I think it's super important to be in that setting, you know, with your bare feet and that earthen floor, and those rocks, which are volcanic rocks, which are, again, in lack of better words, the vulva of Mother Earth, that volcano, that red molten lava, that which basically is responsible for nurturing all of us, because that is the best soil, that is the best for agriculture. So those, and that's what creates Earth. That's what's continuing to create Earth around the globe, is this volcanic fire within each of us, which just happens to be red and black. So, you know, these are primary things of, again, across the board, we all share in these elements in our cultural ways. And to reconnect to, you know, to put it really simply, is reconnect to mother, you know, is probably overcoming that barrier is probably the biggest thing. You know, there's all kinds of economic stuff, there's all kinds of other things like that. But I think if we can visualize it and we can at least identify it, I think for young people, I work with, you know, teenagers and adults, for us to identify that what are we really after? You know, I think, what are we really after? Again, that feeling that you feel when you're on that lake at the top of that mountain, you rode your bike up that way. What are we really feeling? What is that inside of us? What is giving us that fulfillment? And I think that's it, that reconnection.
I'm really glad that you brought up colonialism as a reason why we have become increasingly isolated from not only one another, but also our relationship to land. And I take a more of like a class-based or economic position on this question, because in Latino Outdoors, we are constantly working with first-time campers, first-time stand-up paddleboarders, first-time backpackers, first-time fishers. We just finished, one of my compañeras on my team, Wendy Garcia, just finished leading a Vamos a Pescar, or Let's Go Fish event, where we provided skills for people to actually learn how to catch fish. So I think that, you know, Marc had mentioned being landlocked in where you grew up in LA County, and that's really common of low income and first generation people, especially in Southern California and San Diego. And it's incredible that, you know, folks that live in National City have never been to the beach before, because the water by the Tijuana estuary is polluted. You can't swim in it like you can swim in La Jolla shores. So even when these types of recreational opportunities are available to people of color, especially Latinos that are working class, you know, you don't really get to access or enjoy. And there's also the question of having the leisure time to actually do this, especially when you're talking about working class people who can't afford to take, like I took a backpacking trip recently, and that's like a 3-4 day commitment. There's gear, lightweight gear that needs to be purchased. There's the insider knowledge of what one needs on an excursion like this. And that's why when I'm on the trail, I don't see folks that look like me. And I'm often underestimated when I am climbing or leading or doing shit out or doing things outdoors, because I'm a woman of color. And it's, you know, not, beyond just like identity politics, there are active barriers that keep people like us from being in these spaces. And that's why I love being a part of LO. And a final note that I want to make is, in talking about colonization, I think that it's really important for me to publicly denounce the Israeli occupation of Gaza. And Palestine. And I'm really excited to share that our panel has agreed to write a collective statement, and we'll talk a bit about that more after. But, you know, I see my relationship to the outdoors as how can we organize from where we are? And I'm feeling the love on this panel for sure. I'd love to hear what Arya and Amath have to say.
I wanted to say one really quick thing that that kind of, I guess, triggered me with the first time thing. I totally get the first time thing. And one of the things I kind of want to point out is that most of us, if we look 2 generations, maybe 3 generations behind, it's not a first time in our ways, like the fishing or the camping or even
Right.
being on the beach.
Because our
And
ancestors.
I think that's what we try to, what's so great.
Yes. That's a great point, Marc.
Yeah. So that's kind of the reconnection, which kind of, I always find nature does all the heavy lifting for us in our kind of work, because it's you just got to scratch the surface. We're right there with like a generation or two like mine. We all came to the city, into the urban areas because we were sold on some BS. But like my grandfathers lived at the beach. I didn't know that. You know what I mean? And so I just wanted to say the first time in a way, but like again, it's like, and colonial time is only this, it's like a grain of sand. Colonial time is so small in the thousands of year cultures that we all come from on this panel. Thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to share that. Yeah.
Go off, Marc.
I love it. That's such a good one. If I think about how far I have to go back, it's not that far. It's just my mom. You know, my mom grew up in Tibet when it wasn't occupied by China. We had a farm in Girong Valley, which is called like the paradise of Tibet, and Tibet is already called the roof of the world, and Shangri-La and all this other stuff. So it's not even that far from me. But what's interesting is we come here, or first you went to Nepal and then India and then here, and we think that like going to live off of the land, growing your own food, that's kind of going backwards. And I think that's pretty interesting, how quickly that happened for my mom to think, oh, you're doing what your grandfather did, circumambulating Kangrampuche, like that's scary. Don't you want to, you know, there's all of this stuff happens. And I think that speaks to how strong colonization and that process really is, and what we're up against, you know. And it's kind of, it gets ingrained so quickly once you get away from your attachment to mother. And to me, mother is land, mother is a place of belonging, mother is culture, mother is food for sure. So there's all these different ways to connect back to mother. It's not just like, oh, you take a really long bike ride. It's not just these big things, but it can be in these little things too. It could be, you know, me eating zamba or roasted barley flour every morning. That connects me to my ancestors, because that's something that my grandfather carried with him when he circumambulated the holy mountain of Kailash. So I think about, you know, how much damage colonization has done for us on our bodies for generations, on our psyches, but that there's also all of these ways to reconnect back, to take this back. And that's been my experience on the bicycle, especially within the last year, because I've been isolated here in Connecticut, and you know, everything that you hear about Connecticut is true. So I've been spending a lot of time on my bike alone, riding 100 miles with every full moon, because I just like need to get that energy out. And that's been a great way to reconnect as well. And yeah, like I would say for Tibetans, there's a lot of challenges for my community ahead. For sure, we don't have land currently. China doesn't, although China recognizes the rights of indigenous people under the UN Charter that was established back in 2007, they say that they don't have a problem with indigenous people because they don't exist in China. So there's that extra challenge for us. And then once you get into the diaspora, the thinking within my community that indigenous is, primitive, or it's not filled with poetry and song and music and these really complex systems of being with each other. So I think the language has to change too in our heads. And there are Tibetan scholars who are presenting beautiful language like sake toke, which means from the earth and rock, is like the people who are from the earth and rock. So I'm finding that the damage is there, but there's also that desire to come back, to reconnect. Yeah.
I had to take all that in. Yeah, that was, because, I mean, y'all were just hitting the nail on everything, like everything. And so I think all I can really do is just dovetail off what everyone has mentioned. I think when it comes to the outdoors, the main barriers I can think of is safety. I think that when a person has access to the outdoors, sure, like me, I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I can drive 5 minutes to the parkway. I have access. But considering whether it's my skin color, if I want to go rock climbing and I drove like an hour, 2 hours away, the narrative of what it means to be Black changes, especially with the setting. So I wouldn't feel as safe, and then that would limit my access to nature. So there's that. And then just kind of going back into history, and you mentioned, Melissa, like colonialism. And when I'd written this one article for Melanin Base Camp about like challenging the white narrative of conservation, that was probably one of my favorite pieces, just because it just switched the way I thought about a lot of things. When I met Danielle Williams, who was the founder of Melanin Base Camp, I was at this outdoor economy conference, and there were hundreds of people there, and I could count maybe 5 BIPOC, people there. And so she was easy to spot, which is great, because I'm thankful I had the opportunity to like see her and write for Melanin Base Camp. But it made me think like, okay, well, what are the barriers? And I just kind of went back in history, and at least with conservation, since I'm also trying to be, as a better conservationist every day. And I found that just the narrative changes, what it meant to be an environmentalist, and how there were like eugenics practices put through by presidents or friends of presidents to shift the way we think about, non-white people. And that just seeps into the culture, and that makes the outdoors seem so one-dimensional. And that's why, for the past how many years now, there's been this movement towards diversifying the outdoors. And then, Arya, you brought up something really cool, which was pretty much like redefining what it means to be an outdoor enthusiast. A person doesn't have to like highball, it doesn't have to send a crazy like, mountain. It could literally be, like Marc, you were saying, going barefoot in your backyard. That's perfectly fine. If you want to put your feet in the water, if you just want to like read a book by a lake, like there's so many ways that we can connect to the outdoors. And if we make it seem so like arduous, then nobody's gonna take a step to do anything outdoors. So I appreciate everything you all brought up. I think there's so many barriers, but also, Arya, as you mentioned, I think there's room for healing, because like once you diagnose the problem, now people can work collectively to take steps towards like having that solution to like change the mind and the heart and just the collective well-being. So
yeah, and I've been loving seeing how we show up for each other. Like you said, Amath, you went to this huge gathering and there's like 5 BIPOCs, and you're like, those are my people, because we're easy to spot in those kinds of crowds, and with cycling, it's the same. I mean, the barriers there are really easy to spot because bicycles ain't cheap, and you have to change the tires. You have to know how a bike works. You go to a bike shop and the mechanic's giving you sass. Like, there's legit things. And what I've found to be the best way to challenge all of those things is to just get your friends, like go together to that bike shop, ride together, because there is safety in numbers, especially if you're a BIPOC, especially if you're Black, especially if you look poor. And, So yeah, I really appreciate that. We got us, you know.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Go ahead. Oh.
No, I just wanted to say one of these, looking at that word recreation over these past couple of years, I was looking recreation, outdoor recreation, all this stuff, and then I was really sinking in what I was doing with our folks and changing that narrative. Yeah, just like you said, us being just present. We travel sometimes in groups of 20 to 50 of us, and to have that many Native Americans present in in areas wherever we go, whether that be California or other places, is pretty incredible. Everybody's like just starts to look at you, and then if they do ask and they find out that you're actually from that area, and they usually never knew that there was indigenous people who live in Southern California, it's pretty incredible. It starts to feel interesting. Then I kept looking at this word, this recreation. It's really a recreation. It's a recreation of our narrative. And that's true for us as BIPOC people across the board prior to colonialism. Again, because we have learned that we did sail the seas for thousands of years before Columbus. So this recreation of whether us be Black or Asian together on the beach is how we were for a longer time than how we're seeing now. So I started to really use that word and put a hyphen between re and creation on some of my, I guess, professional communications, and people are kind of tripping out on that. But I'm inviting you to just think about that and maybe incorporate it as well, because it's like, that's what we're doing. When does this narrative start? I mean, I understand the healing part and everything, the forward motion of us hanging out together and start to think of it ourselves, now, like amongst each other, like, yeah, this is how we kick it. This is how we've been kicking it. And now we get to have images, because this is changing the narrative is about changing the imagery as well. So having these images of us being there, where even to me, I'm starting to knock myself in the head. Sometimes I have a lot of folks in California getting BIPOC folks back in the ocean surfing. A lot of African American organizations getting folks back in the water. And I'm looking, and I'm like, this is the new narrative. I'm seeing this now. This is not like what they meant us to believe it to be. And that's kind of true for a lot of imagery, like the swastika, for example. That image is across the board on all of our cultures, from Africa to Asia, that what they call the swastika. And somebody took it and they flipped it. And now we all look at it, and it creates triggers for some people, and we're all scared. But so this is the kind of thing I'm saying, like, just to be comfortable in our own skin with each other in these places is like, just again, it's changing that psychological thing, that recreation thing, and us knowing that, yeah, only a generation or two, this is how we did. This feels good. This feels good.
This is why, Marc, I get really frustrated when I'm on panels for like big DEI initiatives for corporations, and they're like, how can we include people in the outdoors? And I like that you're calling attention to or POC in the outdoors. We've been doing this. And also reconceptualizing recreation. I think like this idea of inclusion is that there's this normative understanding of like mountaineering and like able-bodied sports as being able to recreate, whereas for Latinos, it's going to the rio and having a carne asada. It's like you said, Marc, it's kicking it. And I'm also thinking of like the possibilities of expanding what we mean by recreation to also be attentive to the disabled community. Like, it doesn't mean that you're always doing super intensive, expensive, active sports. It's this idea of presence that you had touched upon that I think is at the heart of recreation and what that means for BIPOC people.
Yeah, I love that you both went there and listening to the disconnect between people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and the outdoors, and these like effects of colonialism. My follow-up was going to be like, what strategies do we use to reconnect? And you kind of already mentioned, being together, understanding that there's different ways to be outdoors, not just like having expensive shoes and like being really strong and hang from a rock. But you can just go to the river, you can hang out. But I want to ask a little bit more about this. And thinking of like Amath's article, 6 Ways to Get Outside with BIPOC immigrant parents, that I really loved. I like lists. What other strategies can we use to get outside, to alleviate some of this anxiety, right? I was talking to you all about how I went kayaking over the weekend. And it's just, sometimes it's frustrating to not know like where to put your equipment, even if you have the money now to pay for it, right? Like how do you move in this space? So are there any other like tips or ways that you recommend starting out to be in the outdoors?
Well, of course, I do. These are things that I've been practicing. I would say relatively recently, because probably in the first half of my career or adulthood or whatever, I was a little ashamed of it in a way, because it's like, again, like, people think you're just being like too radical, but it's really just having our meetings outdoors. We mentioned this before. Especially when the climate is better, not when even when it's freezing cold. I mean, there's ways, but to have your meetings outdoors and to sit on a log or to light that fire in front. It's amazing. All of you know what a campfire looks like and the types of thoughts that it invokes from seeing this campfire in front of you just by yourself. So imagine what that does in a unified situation, and where will that bring us as organizations or just in a meeting setting, whether it be personal or communal, is to take this stuff outdoors. What we, in surfing, we have this thing we call a board meeting. It's a board meeting, or we're gonna meet for a board meeting. It's usually because you're on your surfboard out floating in the water. And when you're out floating in the water, just like many of the things that you all do, your mind is open. So it shifts the narrative again from being in that darn, I don't even hardly go to meetings anymore, honestly. I just cut out meetings. I'm just tired of talking about shit, especially in academics. Oh my God, horrible. These are the smartest institutions in the world, and I don't know what they're talking about for so long and not figuring shit out. But they need to get outside. We need to set a fire, and people got to figure this stuff out. And like you said, Mother Earth is going to tell you. I mean, that's all we got to do is open our ears, and open our minds. So I think definitely taking it outside. Again, like 10 years ago, I'd be ashamed just to Zoom from you with the ocean in back of me, because I don't want anybody hating on me. I don't even post what I do a lot of times, because it's just, I don't want the hate, because people think, oh my God, the guy's always outside just having fun balling out. That's not what it is. It's just like me really working and really doing stuff, but it's just how it is. It is what it is. But we've got it with like, oh, beach setting, money, lavish life, whatnot. You know what I mean? But if I show you here, there's like, I'm on Indian territory. There's like nobody on these beaches. There's a couple kids that are fishing. People are just living like normal, and they would be considered poor, in economic standards. But again, just take it outside. Take these meetings outside.
Yeah, I love this. It's like a fight. I'll see you outside. I'll meet you outside by the flagpole. I'm loving this. It is so, for me on my bike, it's so easy for me to just get outside. But sometimes when I've been super depressed this past year, I haven't wanted to go outside or do anything. And in those times, I've just watched the birds and have the birds do it for me, because I see little sparrows and woodpeckers out here who are out there enjoying nature, and I watch them and ask them to carry me. I've seen foxes out here, and I tell them, please carry my spirit with you, because I can't go out there right now. I don't want to be out there right now. And I think that's worked for me. That's really brought me back, and that sense of connection. Wherever you are, I think it's possible, even without going physically outside, you can still be connected to so many creatures and relatives who are out there trying to help you out, or are just trying to do their own thing, and you're being nosy and asking them how their day went. So I want to put that in there too.
I also I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, you can step outside without necessarily stepping outside, and you can do so with your mind, your heart, and your spirit. I think that's very important, especially like with everything that's happened, not just within the past few years, but I feel like mental health, emotional health, anything that usually has to do with our insides, I feel like hasn't been given as much attention to, like, the physical things, like our actual bodies. So to be able to find different ways to embrace the outdoors without actually stepping outside is a great bridge. And so what I'll do is I'll even like share this in the chat. But I have good friends. One of them is Sanjana, who's initially a filmmaker, and she was working with Brave Space Media to create this film called Expedition Reclamation. And it initially has to do with just like, once again, understanding ourselves in relation to ourselves in the environment, tapping into the roots of who we are, mind, body, soul, as well as like the activities we like to do. And the film's supposed to come out soon, but when I spoke with Sanjana, she mentioned that it's important for them to show that it's just as valuable for a person to pray outside than it is for another one to speak the names of their ancestors to a river or to a waterfall. And I just wanted to touch on a little more where, Marc, you brought up like outdoor education, and I think that's huge. When I graduated college in 2015, I was a psychology major. Didn't really know what to do, so I took that gap year, moved to Asheville, where I am now, and did like this AmeriCorps journey for a year. And I was put at this charter school where the charter was social justice, but they also valued outdoor education. So a lot of the time we would go into the food garden, learn about composting, learn about eating healthy, and our relationship to the soil and to one another. And it just made me think that, at least to me, when I step outside, it's almost like the mind and the heart expands compared to like being in like a really enclosed environment. I feel like a person's like claustrophobic, they're frantic, they're not really thinking, as maybe logically, but to step outside and be able to have quote unquote no barriers is something that would help, I think, just expand the way we think. And if a person can access that through having a fox carry their spirit or watching a documentary or a video, that's huge. That makes it so much more tangible and accessible for people. So
Amath, I love in your article how you emphasize patience. There's a part where you're like, I thought it was going to be different subcategories, but they're all be patient, be patient, be patient, be patient. I took my mom for a Mother's Day hike and it was a disaster. It was a total disaster. She does not like hiking. She's about to retire, this woman's been working since like age 10. And she doesn't know how to enjoy her free time, that leisure time that I was talking about, right? When working class people finally get the time to breathe, it's like, what do I do? Like this soul disconnect that is searching for how to pass one's time and reconnect. So in answering the question in a really simple way, I think it's really meeting our parents, our tias, our aunties, our uncles where they're at, and taking
yes,
baby steps to reintroduce them, because I want our family to be happy outside and enjoying the time that they do have when they're free of work and the confines of work, to enjoy their life. They deserve it, right? Our parents have been through so
very
much.
much so.
Our families have been through so much, and I see the disconnect of like, what is the point of recreating outdoors when that seems like work or labor? But something I sensed the hike was too much. I ended up putting her back in the car and drove us to the lake, so that she didn't have to hike there, and she enjoyed that. So being patient, knowing where they're at, not pushing it. Like I really want her to be my like hiking mom, but she's not there, and that's
I
so
resonate. Yeah, I resonate with that. I think that it's really beautiful because it's just it's very compassionate. It's a compassionate mindset to have. I didn't, grow up with like a tent or anything like that. Like to me, thankfully, I think like generally an immigrant story in the U.S., the person it means is like explore the U.S., try to tap into every kind of corner and things like that. So we did that for a little bit when I was a kid and I moved from France here. But it wasn't until like, college and afterwards that I was like more intentional about spending time outdoors. And so, when I have asked like my mom or dad if they want to go hiking, my mom's side, it's more so, insects, bugs, bears, nah, I'm good. Like, I'm okay.
right.
On my dad's side, because he was born in a village, he was like, dude, I've been doing this for like a lot of my life, so I don't really want to go back. Yeah. But I think it's, yeah, exactly. But I think it's really cool that you mentioned, because it's, you know, I think historically humans have done things outside more than we've done things inside, like buildings, all these. Yeah, I'm sure we've had like habitats and all this, but generally speaking, I feel like we've spent a lot of time outdoors. So just reintroducing that in a way that's gentle, yeah, to our family members is nice and pivotal. And patience is not easy for sure. I think that's the emphasis on
Be
putting
patient.
that in there. Yeah, because it's not easy, especially with generational gaps and different forms of culture. But once again, I think like when a person steps outside alone or with their family, maybe they'll look at something that like brings back a memory, and then bam, storytelling comes in. And now maybe the outdoors are not to be strenuous, but a time where you can share stories with your loved ones.
I love that.
Yeah, and both of your shares made me a little emotional. Also thinking about like my parents and that patience and that lack of patience that sometimes is ingrained right into our brains. Like we should do things a certain way. I hope people in the audience that feel similarity with these stories are getting inspired, right, to how to reconnect. But I also want to talk to kind of like the other side, or to people that want to express how to be in the outdoors, right? And I'm thinking of these trends and organizations like No Trace Left Behind or No Geotagging that are telling you how to be in the outdoors. And for those who don't know, no geotagging is like, don't attach geographical coordinates to an image. So don't share where a photo or video was taken. And I think these are two practices that on the surface level seem like good for the environment, right? Like no trash, like no crowds. But on closer examination are kind of exclusionary and like blind to class and racial-based barriers that we've been talking about for the whole conversation. And they continue to do this colonial harm. What is your relationship to strategies like this? Are they ever useful, and have they intersected your work in any way? And what do you do to undo this like imposition of how to be?
That's hard. I personally would love to hear other opinions, because I'm also trying to navigate through these waters and walk through these trails. I think from like, we can look at this from like a micro level, like a macro level, where I think like the micro level, people can say, yeah, okay, if an organization has either had like oppressive initiatives in the past, but let's say they're doing this geotagging, or whether they're for doing positive things, but like the history or the people in place aren't the most well equipped or the most, I guess, best chosen people, like do we accept those forms of outdoor recreation, or do we just like take a step back and say, okay, well, let's look at the bigger picture. Like we don't have to necessarily stay within the realm of what they feel is like outdoor recreation, or what is diversifying the outdoors. And so with geotagging, the first thing that comes to mind is like, if people are worried about BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, any marginalized community going to like a really secret spot, because they're worried about like whether it's a number of people or it not being as like clean or pristine as it used to be. Regarding the first perception, not about it. That's just more like the sense of like possession and ownership when no human being owns the land. There's something I learned the other day. I think like Roman law had something called res communis, and it was apparently like this concept that like air, like water, and then a few other natural resources could not be owned by a person. They're just like, this is for the community. And I think it should be like that. I hope I understood the res communis properly. So if anyone has studied any Roman law or whatever, please correct me. And then the other aspect is like, I understand like the environmental side of it. Usually, when people love something, they'll go in droves. And we've seen what happens when a lot of people go to national parks as during COVID, where there's been apparently more littering and more, degradation of the environment because there's been such a surplus of people who want to like get outside. So I think it's just a matter of like etiquette. I don't think it's a matter of not sharing those places, because everyone has a right or opportunity. Everyone has a right, not necessarily the opportunity, but I believe we can if we strive and work together towards making this accessible to appreciate the beauty on Earth. Like we shouldn't safeguard it. I feel like beauty should be shared. So
Totally with you on that one. Because it's about, well, where are these requests coming from? Like the note, it's a request. It's not like it's not a law. You're not going to get the police isn't going to come knock on your door. So if the request is coming from largely white people who are saying like, you're ruining my space, like get out of my backyard, like forget you're policing how people enjoy the outdoors. And how do we feel about the police right now? Like kill your inner police, please. But if it's coming from indigenous leaders saying don't come to our land, absolutely respect that, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not the issue here. Amath, I think like a lot of indigenous people give back the Black Hills, and then we'll talk about fucking geotagging. Sorry about the language. Like you don't, this isn't your space to be saying that you shouldn't be here. And so if it's in these social relationships, let's talk about other grievances we have before we talk about geotagging, please. I get so annoyed about this. Can you tell? I'm cursing.
I'll throw in a little bit here. In our programs, our fellowship, we're at a lot of places that people don't normally go to, and so I requested that they don't tag exactly where they're at for kind of those reasons. What I have kind of found out and just visiting a lot of places that are, guess like you say, secret spots or whatnot. Again, I go to a lot of places on the continent, so between anywhere in the Americas. But when I go to them, usually, of course, before it was a hot spot or an up and coming spot, usually it's people have been going there for like thousands of years. So it's like I always seem to find that it has a certain sacredness, I guess, more obvious in a way, and that people usually come. And usually, what happens? People usually come and start to party there, whatever. But a lot of these places again are off the beaten track. So it's how do we curate this situation, or who would even care about the curation of it? Of course, one thing that we've been doing locally and around La Jolla is putting this signage up of, again, like what we did with the recognition of the land in this particular presentation, is recognizing that, being able to put some context behind these places like Black's Beach. It's not just a naked. Black's Beach is this beach in La Jolla at the bottom of these cliffs, which is kind of known as a nude beach. So they kind of like, oh, it's the naked beach. Well, I guess half of the beach is a naked beach, but in reality, there's creation stories, there's cultural significance, there's burial sites, at all these universities that we have in California, Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego, Cal State Long Beach, they're all sitting on sacred village sites or burial areas that we need to put some context to. And this is for me, it's just, again, the same thing like when I go to these hikes or these off the beaten path spots, which are like usually sacred, and many people, not only are we getting a vibe off of it and getting juiced up, but people have been coming there for thousands of years getting juiced up on this vibe as well. So it is hard as surfers. It's a weird thing now. It's like that's one of the things that what they call destroys the spot, when you let people know where you're at, these secret spots. That's like the worst one. Those guys are the ones that are in the water growing up, and they're like the locals only, we're the locals and all this stuff, and they're the ones that giving you like bad vibes when you show up in Newport Beach as a Mexican or as a BIPOC. I don't know as much now as before when I started in the 80s, but it's a trip. I wish there was some curation involved, like me sitting out in the water in those situations. I'm just thinking, man, I wish like I could just break down the whole education of it all. And I think that's what we always go back to, is abolishing this colonial education. And where do we start? Where do we restart all of this? And who's going to curate this for us? I mean, who even knows? Like, you know, we like to think, oh yeah, this Native American person is going to show up and just like curate this. But it's like a lot of this, again, their whole goal was to wipe it, lobotomize us for 2 generations. So to find this information, just even the stuff I'm sharing with you about around La Jolla or the village sites that are underwater, or just around the cliffs, like that stuff is not common knowledge, you know. And even to know our, what we call our maritime knowledge as a people, if any of you here on the panel is, you know, from the coast, what is our maritime knowledge? What do we know about that? You know, has it been wiped off? Or so a lot of us in our program, what we're doing as far as this curation we're talking about, this contextual for these areas that we don't want to advertise of knowing, it's us finding out about it first, you know, or relearning it, or again with that recreation. I know a lot of spots where you find petroglyphs. Like I think I read on one of the questions, you know, the guy that was you know hiking or rock climbing over the petroglyph. Again, that's another thing, you know. And how many petroglyph sites have I been to where they're getting defaced and everybody just goes there to party? They're kind of going there to party and they're getting drunk because something special is getting invoked in them, but they're going about it all, you know, I guess in a way wrong or disrespectful. So I don't know, I guess on the simple thing back to this is like, yeah, have some more signage at Balboa Park on what that site represents. I don't know if you guys got signage at Balboa Park yet, but we need to, you know, that's a village site as well. So you know, these are things I guess that we could push for when we're talking about indigenous areas or context. I guess in the larger sites, larger place, maybe not the like off the beaten path stuff, but you know, anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you so much. I think you're kind of on this path, so I want to insert a attendee question. It says, does the panel have any recommendations on how outdoor organizations can make spaces they manage, city, state, national parks, more welcoming to Black, Indigenous people of color? How can we help create safe spaces?
Melissa, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm kind of like piecing my thoughts together because I'm not sure if it's so much that like we have to ask these spaces to be more welcoming rather than it is us demanding that we are a part of those spaces. Again, it's like the question of inclusion. Like, what are we trying to be included in? What are we demanding? So I really liked what Arya had said about like if I've had that experience when you go to a bike mechanic and they're like assholes, you know, to you, bring your friend. I'm just thinking a lot about like how much of our outdoor experience is about the safety and sense of identification that we have with one another. I think that so for example, like Balboa Park, or asking like funding institutions that are backing DEI initiatives with corporations like REI. REI does have a partnership with Latino Outdoors where we do certain social media campaigns, but when it comes to actually, I think that there can always be more for inserting more capital and financial funding for local organizations like the ones that we're a part of, so that we have the power to then insert ourselves in those spaces. So I think it's more about like how can our local organizations be more properly supported so that we can do that work to demand that these spaces reflect our needs and our wants.
That's great. I mean, if I could share what we did with formerly WTF Bike Explorers, is we got a lot of feedback from the first year we were organizing that there needed to be more BIPOC space, that spaces needed to be space safer, even within this very like specific group of adventure riders who identified as women, trans, femme. Even when you get that specific, there's still work to be done. It's never complete. You know, you can get as specific as possible, and yet you can't guarantee a safe space because we don't live in a safe world for a lot of us. And as the group developed, we got better. We got a little bit better the second year, and then I stepped out of leadership along with half of our founders and made way for new leadership, because we realized that capacity in the leadership roles needed to change. So, and relationships needed to be built. So for organizations, and we've been getting this question pretty much all year from lots of different orgs who like read How to Be an Anti-Racist and want to do better. And want to have those transformative relationships within their organization. I think the best way to start is to look at your leadership and figure out, well, who are the people making decisions and who needs to be there. If you are not willing to give up your own power to radically change the relationship you have with your land or your organization, I would start there. You know, it's not like you can take a magic pill and make spaces safer for everybody. I think we need to let go of this idea that spaces are safe and that we can even create safe spaces. People show up with their friends and we need different leadership, and leadership needs to change. Like all of this needs to happen. We need to live like the seasons and think like seeds, not so much these like rigid, stuck ways of how an organization should develop over a course of a year, or how to please your board. If the board is messing with you, change the board, you know?
And I think that it's courage. Yeah. You know, even like the courage to change the board, to change the game. Because, you know, as we see now, whether it's like with, you know, people in power, people, whether it's like the president or whether it's people in government, actors and actresses, there's so much, I believe, just like social pressure that, you know, whether their heart says to do what's right or not, they're going to stick with the status quo, or they're going to stick with what the system wants because, you know, like you initially mentioned, Mark, like doing something that's like different, whether it's like, you know, having a Zoom session with like the beach in the background, people are just going to throw hate or flack for no reason, just because they don't understand the narrative, they have their own assumptions. So people in power, I feel, are scared to speak up because of either a lack of courage or because of just like fear of society. I think that with people that like BIPOC, LGBTQ+, people of marginalized communities that struggle with making those spaces safe, it's even more of a risk, you know, because it's just extra. It's more hate, it's extra flack, it's more negative sentiment, negative narratives. And so how do we push through this? And I think you really hit the nail on the head, just finding like-minded people. Easier said than done, which is why I'm glad, honestly, I found Melanin Base Camp. Like, I didn't even know that there was like this hub of just like all these different types of people saying, hey, we love the outdoors. I'm like, oh, dang, like I'm just scrolling through and seeing lots of color, you know, and then I'll walk into like, I don't know, an outdoor store and it's just like pretty basic, you know? So I'm just trying to like figure out where's the disconnect here. And so maybe a way is, yeah, and maybe it's not courage, because I believe that just, you know, a person, you know, a BIPOC person can have the courage, but it's just harder. It's just harder. There's way more barriers than people imagine. And so for those risk takers to take those steps and build those safe spaces, build those organizations, it's amazing. And I guess maybe the last thing I'll mention is, I think once a person has like the safety in numbers to even strengthen the courage to do something, they could build pockets of like coalitions, like coalition building, you know, where it's not just, hey, in Asheville, North Carolina, we're doing this. It's like, okay, well, we're based here in Asheville, North Carolina, but our values and our sentiment is worldwide or nationwide. So we can have pockets of people all across the US or all across the world who believe in this vision of a more safer, diverse, and more well outdoor community.
Yeah. Amath, could I just piggyback off you quickly? I think that, you know, I've been hearing a lot about, sometimes when I do panels, I get the feedback that from like people that might not vibe with what I'm saying, that I'm making the outdoors really political. And I think that what you're saying to have the courage, like we need to move beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion for BIPOC in the outdoors. I think we need to have the courage, like bringing up again the example of Palestine. I'm shocked that all of these organizations that have wanted people to talk about the effects of colonialism and the outdoors have yet to take a stance, and it's because it's controversial and people confuse anti-Semitism with being against Zionism. And there's a fundamental difference between being opposed to an occupation versus an entire group of peoples. And so I think that we get really stuck when inclusion and representation are at the core of making the outdoors more safe. What we need is courageous organizations to take really difficult stances and draw the line in the sand and be clear that the values that they're purporting to uphold by wheeling in a Black person or a Latino person to rock climb, you need to do that in a material way. You have to walk the walk. That's what organizing is about. And I'm really glad that we're going to end up doing a collective statement amongst us to show that we have the power in being in the outdoors to make that political statement that settler colonialism is at the heart of this.
Yeah, I wanted to also say that, it's really refreshing, because the thing that answers that last question, it's like we on this panel are really part of this solution to making it safer. The fact that we're organizing in these groups to go out, in this past, wow, I don't know, 2 years, I have a whole network of folks now that I see doing this, like Outdoor Afro and Black Girls Surf and all these things. I'm like, they're, because this inclusion thing is a little tough. Like when you're demanding and you're forcing it, they don't want to hang out with us. Okay, cool, but we want to hang out with ourselves. We want to hang out with each other, and I like that. They said Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about inclusion, but he was also talking about non-inclusion. We just got to like do our stuff and stop worrying about trying to fit in at their table or fit in whatever, because it's like like the university, again, these smart people, they're like molasses. They're so slow in making change. 25 years later, we're still talking about ethnic studies. God damn. So I'm just saying, like, nature, again, as our church or as our place of worship, I love what's happening. I'm super stoked. This is part of the solution. Hats off and salute to all of you here on this panel and the other ones that are making these places. I'm getting inspired. I'm like, yeah, finally. I thought, what I mean? I'm like super stoked. Black Girls Surf is helped with getting girls in the water, but then they did this these paddle outs against police brutality and these killing of Floyd and other folks. And I've been getting inspired. I think I have people calling, like all of you. This is a trip thing. We got all these people calling us, wanting to be a part of how to be inclusive or whatever. My work has kind of doubled, having to field all these people. And I don't want to have to come in and like start having to give cultural sensitivity workshops for free over and over again. It's kind of hard, you know what I mean? And I let them know it. I'm not just talking to you all. I let them know it too, because this build bridging is a little interesting. It's a little, to get the bridge gets high. People are afraid of the heights. This is kind of real what we go through. But I really want to just say thank you, because we're creating these times, because we don't want to have these circles to go out in nature just to complain and be all bummed. We're going out there to celebrate and to let some of this off of our shoulder. So I like what we're all doing as part of the solution. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you, because you guys continue to give inspiration to all of us. So I'm really, a lot of times we're always talking about like, how do we do it, like that question. We are doing it. Thank God, thank God. So I just want to give it up. Yeah.
I've been waiting to quote from Arya's bio. Thank you to friends and family for giving me the courage to be courageous. I just love that line, and I think it encompasses. We have about 10 minutes. I want to fit in a couple of panelists' questions. One that we kind of touched on, but there's a couple likes attached to it, so I think people want a little bit more information. Can the panel elaborate on, oh, sorry, I lost it. I'm curious to hear more about how to invite people who have that strong and sometimes traumatic experience of seeing land and the outdoors as work and lack of wealth or being poor.
I think it goes back to, I think one way, I don't think entirely, I think one way it goes back to is just like reconnecting with our roots. Once again, I saw this post on Instagram the other day, and it initially talked about how this person who's initially trying to help diversify the outdoors recognizes that she's not the first one to do it, and not even the first one to do it within her family, you know. And so, you know, I think she mentioned as an immigrant, you know, coming to the U.S., you know, usually in general, I think when people have kids, they want to show their kids a fun time. Kids, I think, have an affinity towards nature. And I think we need to like reintroduce ourselves to it. And so, you know, as a parent, you want to explore with your child, and you want to help them see the world and teach them this is a flower, those are clouds. And so a person doesn't necessarily have to be rich to, okay, I just want to make sure I choose my words carefully. Thankfully, if a person has the opportunity or has like the blessings of sight and hearing, these senses, you know, then they're able to see the clouds and see the world and take that into account. But I guess what I'm actually trying to go at is usually, you know, people come from so many different socioeconomic backgrounds. And, you know, for many of us, our parents or grandparents weren't that financially well off. But they still found, hopefully, the way to explore nature. Like Marc, for example, I think you had looked through like traditional medicine and understanding how that can play in the role, or like ancestral food. So whether it's like farming or gardening, like it can be something so daily that sometimes we overlook. And I think that just comes with like, I think being present once again and not being too desensitized to the things we do. And so this is going to be a really ridiculous story, but during COVID, because there were times I didn't really feel like going outside when I had to take out the trash, and most likely it was at night because I'd usually forget until it was too late. I would take out the trash the night before, but I'd make sure to look up at the sky just so I can like see if I can see any stars, or like where's the moon, is it a full moon? That way I can take in that little bit of nature. So even if those like 10 paces outside the house can do wonders. Yeah, I think that's initially it. Just kind of going back and trying to find any bit of time to step outside. It doesn't have to be like a 7-day excursion or anything.
Thank you for reminding us of that. And I think this also, I mean, everything is interconnected, but I love this question. I think it relates a little bit to what you're saying. Can the panel elaborate on universal values and benefits across culture of spending time outdoors and how that contributes to overall wellness?
I think part of that is knowing that we're not separate from nature. Like all of us, we're all connected by breath. You know, we can tap into each other and trees and so many other things with just our breaths. We're breathing right now, you know, and just that little awareness, like not mindfulness in the way that it's marketed, but like real connection, you know, real sense of we are all siblings like on this planet. The richest person has to breathe too, you know, we could suffocate that person. You know, we're all breathing, and just remember that we're in this together. You know, the wildest animals out there hibernating or journeying across glaciers are breathing, and they're breathing with us, and that it's not something completely outside of ourselves or separate, that we're here. And you can tap into that at any point, right now, later. If you're depressed and don't want to move, you can still breathe and close your eyes and imagine that bear walking across, or catching that salmon and feeling the taste of that, or that little bug that's, you know, you can imagine you are a little bug underneath the dirt, just kind of waiting for winter to be over so you can come out. We're not separate from any of those beings. And I'm sure you feel that way, Marc, when you get into the ocean. It's like you're part of it, right? Just to bring that little bit in there.
Yeah, I think bringing up like mental health is so important to this. I know I myself, a lot of people have struggled really deeply with depression because of the pandemic, and being outside has been a way that I can directly combat, not resolve, but feel okay in that moment. So I'm not going to say like being outside will cure your depression, but there are so many skills that I think can be cultivated with consistently going outside. There's skills that I'm trying to teach my nephew, for example. So to give an example, he came over for Mother's Day and we were in the backyard of my parents' house and he had noticed the bees because there was a lot in the pool. So I brought him over to look at the flowers and how the bees are sticking their little butts in their heads inside of the pollen. And I explained, even just that connection between the two of them. And now I saw him last weekend and he had, look, there's bees over there. Like it cultivates. People are always looking to be a student and a teacher. So play with those roles when you're outside, especially when you're bringing people that are maybe first timers, and start, again, going to Amath's words of wisdom, start slow and start patiently. Being outside is all about moving at a slow pace, observing where the birds are going, which trees they're favoring, what types of nuts the squirrels are gathering. Just slowing down that pace and starting from your backyard can be a great place to do that.
Thank you so much. Just listening to y'all is already relaxing, and definitely seconds the breathing. Right, as an educator, I often like to start classes with breathing and just like being aware of like what space you're entering. We have about 5 minutes, so I want to, for the final moment, I want to give you space for any final thoughts, but we also have a question. So choose your own adventure. You can answer the question that I'm about to read, or you can, just say whatever you want to say as a final thought. The question is, can you talk a little bit about creating a career out of your passion of the outdoors as a BIPOC?
Well, I'm probably older than most people on the panel. I'm 50 years old, and I feel like I'm just coming into my being as far as what I'm doing. I'm looking back, I go, wow, this was destiny. And I guess I'll just leave with the quote my mom would always remind me. She says, if it wasn't about the money, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? And that's kind of how I live now, by like, it's like, if it wasn't about, or I'll restate that, if it wasn't about money, what would you do? If it wasn't about the money, what would you do? And all of us, it's weird because we all are connecting to something. I know there's economic factors in accessing certain parts of nature. I get that part, but at the same time, we're all accessing something that doesn't really cost, in a way. I know we need equipment, but as far as like what's already there, Mother Earth or Mother Nature is constant giving. And we're kind of a receiver. We should be giving back at the same time, in many different forms. But I guess that's it. Follow is what you want to do. As far as for health as well, use it or lose it. So for me, at age 50, still surfing and trying to increase my time in the water. That's kind of been one of my goals, is how am I going to increase my time in the water? And if you like surfing, there's so many ways to be a part of it, or what do you like about nature? And it's weird because I founded this organization, and I kind of created my own space, my own niche, I guess. At the time when I started this organization, there wasn't people doing yoga. They weren't really surfing. Everybody was tripping on me. I thought I was trying to be like white or hippie or whatever, but I just went along and kept doing what I knew that was right. And now these things are becoming kind of like household names, like yoga and even surfing, so I was alone for a while. So even if you're out there and you're alone doing some sport or creating something, it's interesting to know if you follow that intuition. And I think, again, intuition is connected to that earth vibe. And if you really connect it like that, it's gonna come out. One of our students who's like 18, he's into parkour, and he just did an indigenous history of parkour. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that? I was like, and then he broke it down. I was like, yo, this is great. So he does a lot of parkour at Balboa Park. So if you ever see him out there, he's always parkouring at Balboa Park. Anyway, thank you. That's my closing.
I just want to say I loved this panel. Free Palestine. We'll follow up about the statement. And I think that this is a great starting point for us to maybe do more coalition work. I'm thinking past COVID, like if we had more meetups of BIPOC folk in the outdoors, if we did, like Marc said, just kick it, imagine the organizing that could come forth from that and building deep relationships with one another. So I hope we can kick it in person at some time. And thanks to the Museum of Us for having us and all the participants and panelists.
We're ready to do
We did that at the same time. Yeah, thank you so much for everybody. I feel like I know y'all just smiling at all of this interaction. Thank you for creating that space. Brandy for the invitation. Luisa for holding us in this space, and all of us for sharing all that we do. I wanted to plug, not really plug, but I've been talking about community and getting outside, and the organizers for RAR, Radical Adventure Writers, are taking, they're doing chapters right now. So whatever region you're in, you can get together with people who fit your demographic you're looking for and ride together. Safety in numbers, safety and knowledge shared there. So if you want to ride bikes, if you need support riding bikes, that's definitely the way to get started regionally, where you can go right now and get your people, because it's really nice having your people really close by. Appreciate y'all.
I also just wanted to say thank you, Luisa, Museum of Us, everyone who really put this together, all the panelists. It's been really amazing seeing your faces. I've been taking a lot of notes, so I'm just gonna take this wealth of knowledge, God willing, internalize it and share it. Lastly, I just want to mention, I think the thing that will help with just one of those universal values is like the sense of wonder. I think humans are generally, they just love to learn. I think we're knowledge seeking. And so I think it just takes a little bit of rejuvenating that sense of wonder, because it can be so easy to get desensitized with life moving fast and life moving forward. And then lastly, I think that's it. If a person ever wants to have a career in the outdoor space as a BIPOC individual, I think the fact that you're even a participant in this is a huge step. So like, you're willing to learn, you're taking initiative to grow, you can make connections. Don't ever feel afraid to reach out. That's one thing I'll say. Don't ever feel afraid to reach out. Doesn't matter if they're CEO, founder, whatever, like reach out to them. They're a human being. And more than likely, they're gonna be so stoked that you reached out to them, because they see that you see value in them, that you're driven towards a goal that's bigger than yourself. So.
Thank you all so much. So much fun and so much warmth. In the chat, you can see links to the panelists' different organizations, so you can reach out. Please make sure to check out their work. And just a quick reminder, as you can see on your screen, in one week, yes, we will have the screening of the film Gather, followed by a panel. So thank you so much for coming in, and we hope to see you with the film Gather on Thursday, May 27th. You can also find the registration link in the chat. And the final thing is that once we log off of Zoom, you will be met with a little survey. And that helps us for future events, right? To take into account accessibility, to take into account the topics you want to listen to hear about, to take into account, like Amath said, your sense of wonder. So hugs and goodbye.